With the First Punic War concluded, the Roman Republic emerged as a power with ambitions extending beyond its original horizons. But expansion across the Mediterranean was not yet Rome's strategic focus. The immediate objective was to consolidate its position within the Italian peninsula, to extend Roman authority to the geographical boundaries that could provide natural defense and logistical coherence. The Senate's concern was not abstract territorial aggrandizement, but the establishment of a secure and sustainable frontier system. The war with Carthage had exposed the structural fragilities of Rome's northern frontier. The Gauls, long a menace in the Po Valley, remained outside Roman control, and their raids continued to menace Etruria and Umbria. To the east, the Adriatic coast was vulnerable to piracy and external interference. The center of Roman strategy shifted to neutralizing these threats, not through temporary alliances or punitive expeditions, but through permanent structural integration via colonies, roads, and military occupation. Mommsen characterizes this pivot as a deliberate act of statecraft, not mere opportunism. The extension of Roman influence to the Alps in the north and the Adriatic in the east was presented as a rational reconfiguration of the Italian system. Rome's magistrates and consuls were increasingly dispatched not to subdue Italy's heartland, which was already Roman in form and allegiance, but to fortify its margins, where non-Latin peoples resisted or remained unincorporated. This phase marked the shift from survival to consolidation. Rome was no longer content with dominance over allies and federated cities. It now pursued territorial depth, natural frontiers that could support both military campaigns and long-term economic exploitation. In this light, the post-war decades were not a lull, but a reorientation, a critical period in which the Republic redefined what it meant to govern Italy and how to prepare for the imperial contests that were already gathering beyond the seas. In securing its northern frontier, Rome confronted a mosaic of independent peoples, most prominently the Ligurians and Gauls, who had long resisted subjugation and posed a constant threat to the settled regions of Etruria and the central Apennines. The Senate recognized that temporary campaigns would not suffice. What was needed was the transformation of the Po Valley and the northern Apennines from hostile borderlands into integrated Roman territory. The process began with military operations designed not simply to punish incursions, but to break the capacity of resistance. Roman legions pushed into Ligurian and Gallic lands with sustained force, establishing a pattern of seasonal campaigns that gradually eroded tribal autonomy. But conquest alone was not the objective. Mommsen emphasizes that colonization and infrastructure were the essential tools by which Rome intended to hold what it had taken. Key to this strategy was the foundation of Latin colonies, such as Placentia and Cremona, positioned at vital junctions on the Po River. These settlements served dual functions: military outposts capable of rapid mobilization and civilian communities that introduced Roman legal and economic norms into contested regions. Their establishment signaled that Rome was not merely occupying these territories, but absorbing them. To connect these new zones to the heart of Italy, Rome constructed the Via Aemilia, a strategic road stretching from Ariminum to Placentia. More than a logistical asset, it was an instrument of Romanization, enabling troop movements, trade, and administrative control. The road turned what had been a barrier, the Apennines, into a corridor for Roman expansion and cultural transmission. The Gallic resistance, fierce though it was, could not withstand this multi-layered pressure. Rome was not only fielding armies, but reshaping the physical and political landscape of northern Italy. In doing so, it extended not just its reach, but its identity, replacing tribal autonomy with municipal order and forging the first outlines of an Italy bounded not by tribal frontiers, but by Roman infrastructure and law. To the east, Roman attention turned toward the Adriatic, where instability along the Illyrian coast threatened maritime trade and the safety of allied Greek cities. The Illyrian principalities, loosely organized and often engaged in piracy, posed a direct challenge to Rome's emerging status as a Mediterranean actor. Their raids disrupted commerce and undermined the security of navigation between Italy and Greece. What followed was not a grand campaign of conquest, but a strategic assertion of Roman authority, calculated, limited, and diplomatically framed. In 229 BCE, Rome launched what would later be known as the First Illyrian War. Under the pretext of protecting Roman merchants and honoring appeals from threatened Greek polities like Apollonia and Epidamnus, the Senate dispatched a fleet and legions across the Adriatic. The campaign was swift. Roman forces defeated the forces of Queen Tuda, dismantled Illyrian naval bases, and imposed a treaty that curtailed piracy and prohibited Illyrian ships from sailing south of Lissus. Mommsen stresses that the operation marked a crucial shift. Rome had now crossed from the western to the eastern Adriatic, not merely as a protector, but as a power capable of enforcing order beyond Italy. The strategic significance of the campaign was less about the conquest of territory than about Rome's emergence as a hegemon in the Adriatic. By installing garrisons and securing alliances with Greek coastal cities, the Republic signaled to the Hellenistic world that it was now an arbiter of regional security. This was further reinforced in the Second Illyrian War, 219 BCE, a more limited conflict prompted by Illyrian attempts to reassert independence. Once again, Roman intervention was quick and decisive, reaffirming the earlier settlement and demonstrating that the Adriatic was no longer a peripheral concern, but an integrated part of Roman strategic planning. Through these campaigns, Rome extended not only its military presence, but also its diplomatic reach. Without annexing large swaths of territory, it imposed a new political order, one that compelled local rulers to accept Roman oversight and dissuaded external powers, particularly from the Greek East, from challenging Rome's growing influence. What began as an anti-piracy expedition had become the foundation of Roman hegemony in the Adriatic basin. Even as Roman legions expanded their reach in the north and east, the Senate remained acutely aware of Carthage. Though officially at peace since 241 BCE, both powers treated the interwar years not as reconciliation, but as armed reprieve. Rome, having expelled Carthage from Sicily, had no immediate interest in a renewed confrontation. Yet the Senate observed with growing concern as Carthage began to reconstitute its power, not in Africa, but in Spain. Mommsen notes that this period was marked by a complex diplomatic balance. Both Rome and Carthage refrained from direct hostilities, but their movements revealed underlying competition. While Rome focused on Italy and the Adriatic, Carthage, under the command of Hamilcar Barca, embarked on a campaign of expansion in the Iberian Peninsula. The objective was clear: to recover the economic and military strength lost in Sicily by exploiting the mineral wealth and manpower of Spain. This expansion was not conducted through chaotic plunder, but through methodical conquest, colonization, and the forging of local alliances. Hamilcar, followed by his son-in-law Hasdrubal and later by his son Hannibal, laid the groundwork for a new Punic dominion that would rival Rome in size and potential. Rome, wary but not yet threatened, responded not with arms, but with diplomacy. A treaty in 226 BCE fixed the Ebro River as the northern limit of Carthaginian expansion, an arrangement designed to contain Carthage without provoking war. Mommsen interprets this moment not as a lapse in vigilance, but as a calculated pause. Rome was consolidating Italy, securing naval routes, and establishing itself in the eastern Adriatic. To open a new front in Spain would have overstretched its resources. Instead, it sought to delay conflict while preserving its freedom to act when the balance shifted. Carthage, too, was preparing, not for coexistence, but for the restoration of its geopolitical standing. The result was a fragile equilibrium. Treaties signed not in trust, but in anticipation of their breach. Beneath the surface of peaceful engagement, both states were positioning themselves for the inevitable reckoning. Rome watched Iberia become a new theater of Carthaginian ambition. Carthage saw Roman legions drawing closer to the Alps and the sea. The war had paused, the contest had not. In the final phase of this chapter, Mommsen turns to the mechanism through which Rome, transformed conquest into permanence, colonization. The Republic did not merely defeat its enemies. It replaced their political and social orders with institutions that reflected Roman norms. New colonies were established across Italy's frontiers, each serving as a node of military readiness, economic production, and cultural assimilation. These were not imperial outposts imposed from afar, but settlements populated by Roman and Latin citizens who brought with them the legal and agrarian framework of the Republic. Colonies like Placentia, Cremona, and Brundisium became anchors of Roman presence in volatile regions. They were founded not on tribal structures or existing cities, but on the Roman model of municipia, self-governing, loyal, and fully integrated into the broader fabric of Roman Italy. This system allowed Rome to hold vast and diverse territories with relatively modest garrisons. Where other powers might have relied on tribute or distant military oversight, Rome built communities that replicated its civic order, extending the Republic's identity far beyond the walls of the city itself. Infrastructure reinforced this process. The expansion of road networks, such as the Via Appia and Via Aemilia, connected colonies with each other and with Rome. These roads were not only arteries of commerce, but also of administration, justice, and rapid military deployment. They bound disparate peoples into a unified political space and facilitated the diffusion of Latin language, Roman coinage, and Roman law. Mommsen emphasizes that this strategy did not produce uniformity, but it did produce cohesion. Allies and subject peoples were gradually drawn into a system where local autonomy existed within a framework of Roman supremacy. The creation of new citizens, the sharing of military burdens, and the distribution of land all contributed to a sense of participation in Rome's ascent. The result was a durable structure, a political organism capable of absorbing shocks, projecting power, and mobilizing resources at a scale unknown to its adversaries. What Rome built in these decades was not merely a territorial empire, but a political architecture that could sustain future wars, endure crises, and accommodate the transition from republic to dominion. This internal expansion, though less dramatic than campaigns of conquest, was in Mommsen's account the true foundation of Rome's imperial longevity. Following its victory over Carthage and the consolidation of Italy's frontiers, Rome did not revert to isolation. Instead, it began to operate as the hegemon of the Western Mediterranean, increasingly projecting influence over foreign states without annexing them outright. The Republic's methods in this phase were subtle and institutional rather than overtly imperial. Mommsen draws particular attention to how Rome exercised power through diplomacy, alliance systems, and displays of military capacity, all without provoking open war. This new mode of Roman hegemony is exemplified in its relations with the Hellenistic world. Greek city-states, particularly along the Adriatic and in southern Italy, had long operated in a web of local rivalries and foreign patronage. Rome's interventions in these spheres, ostensibly to protect trade or allies, effectively reoriented the region's political order around itself. The Greek cities were not conquered but compelled to acknowledge Roman superiority. Their autonomy remained nominal, yet they deferred increasingly to Roman arbitration and disputes. Mommsen emphasizes that this authority was backed by force but exercised through diplomacy. Envoys were dispatched, treaties were redrawn, and military presence was selectively asserted, not to establish provinces, but to impose terms. Roman magistrates acted as arbiters, not as governors. This preserved the illusion of independence while ensuring the reality of Roman control. What emerged was a Mediterranean order in which Rome defined the limits of acceptable conduct. It could dictate who might wage war, what alliances were permissible, and which grievances merited intervention. The Republic thus extended its strategic perimeter far beyond its actual borders. This form of hegemony, Mommsen notes, was both practical and ideological. Rome presented itself not as a conqueror, but as a guardian of order and civility against piracy, despotism, or instability. Its claim to moral authority masked its geopolitical calculus. And yet, Through this balance of force and formality, Rome achieved what more aggressive empires failed to do: the creation of a durable sphere of influence, maintained not only by legions, but by the belief that Rome's favor was essential to survival. The groundwork laid in this period would become the foundation for later expansion into the Greek East. But even now, without formal annexation, Rome had become the central power in the Western Mediterranean, not by proclaiming dominion, but by assuming its functions. We'd love to hear your thoughts on possible future topics. What areas of human evolution would you like to explore next? Leave your suggestions in the comments, and let's keep the conversation going. As always, our references and further reading are listed in the description below if you'd like to dive deeper into the subject. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode.